what's going on? This is Nubia.
And I'm Francis.
And today we have a dope show, right? So we have Roshida with us, Roshida on the loose. She took a mid-career gap year. That's what you would call it, a mid-year
That's what I
career.
was calling it, yeah.
That's like a tongue twister. No, I like it. Why did you say that? That was kind of, because that was authentic. A mid-career gap year. That's a tongue twister by itself. Say it
It is.
5 times.
Mid-career gap year, mid-career gap year, mid-career gap year. I've written it like 1,000 times, so
You got it on lock. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Roshida took a mid-career gap year after practicing law for major corporations. Although she loved what she was doing, something didn't seem right. So she was burnt out and didn't know what to do at the time. She made this radical decision to give it all up, leave her career, her 13-year-old dog,
Pumpkin.
and focus on transforming her life at the highest level possible. And we all met in Thailand.
Yep.
Chiang Mai.
Yeah, at Spike Lee's casting call.
I met you before that.
Really?
Here we
friend.
go.
My bad. Enlighten me.
Here we go.
I think I did.
I thought we all met that one time at Spike Lee's
We
thing.
we may have. I don't remember whether we met there or I knew your name before then.
Okay.
We have a friend who brought you up.
Okay. Yes,
I knew
because when
both.
we met, you were like, "Oh, you're Nubia."
Yes. Okay.
Got it.
Yeah. So
But
you
we
just.
physically, all three of us met
Yeah.
in Chiang Mai, Thailand, at Spike
Spike
Lee's
Lee's
casting
casting
call
call.
for the Five Bloods.
That's crazy.
Yeah. That is. It feels like a lifetime ago.
Right?
Crazy.
And technically, you live in Mexico, and here we are in Mexico.
Yes.
Wow, that's awesome. It's like no matter where you meet people, you cross paths all around the world.
Yeah, the
The-
universe is just funny like that.
It's a small
Someone
place.
else in Chiang Mai is in Mexico right now, and she was just in Mexico City. Now she's somewhere else in Mexico, and I'm like, the world. I mean, the travelers I run into, you keep running into them over and over again.
Yeah.
Well,
You
you'll be
keep-
surprised. There's like 6 of us from Chiang Mai currently living in Mexico.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
They're in different parts of Mexico.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Migration is real.
Is that what we're doing, migrating?
I don't know. Just wandering through life, Lord.
So I like to call you the lady in yellow. I love the fact that you wear this beautiful yellow just popping all over the place, all over my timeline. I'm like, there goes Sheeta.
She stays popping.
Oh, thank you. No, I love yellow, and I decided at some point that this is gonna sound vain, but I wanted to have a signature color, and I was like, I already have all of this. Let's just stick with it for a while and see how creative I can get with the same color.
Well,
And I think part of the reason I really focus on that was because sometimes I get really, really basic. Like I can do jeans and t-shirts every single day. And so to get out of being just jeans and t-shirts you can't do jeans and t-shirts every day if you're doing yellow, because then you're just wearing a yellow t-shirt every day. And so it was a way to sort of step my game up a little bit.
well, it's interesting that you
Force
say
my-
that because they always encourage, like when you're out networking, to wear something a little bit unique and memorable. Whether it's like a certain color lipstick or something around your neck, because then people will remember, oh, I spoke to somebody. I may not remember their name, but I remember they were wearing that bright yellow shirt. So it's like a connection for folks. So you're onto something.
Okay, good. It's
So
working.
I was gonna say, let's jump into how you just was like, forget it, because I understand the burnout. I won't say that I was burnt out like from work, but I was just burnt out from like everything, like being a single mom, an employer, an entrepreneur, a friend, everything. I just needed to like change my whole environment, and that's what like prompted me to leave. So if you can go back to that moment where it was just like, you know what, something's got to give. What were you
Okay.
feeling and what were you doing back then?
Mine is like a multi-step process, but I'll start back with like my job. So I, for the past last, I want to say like 9 years of my career, my job was to look at people's creative ideas. I'm a lawyer, and people would come up with ideas, and I would tell them whether they could do them or not. Most of the time, these are business people, so their idea is intended to make the company more money. And so there's this big force pushing it forward. Yes, we have to do this. Yes, we have to do this. And I spent most of my day being the bad guy and saying like, nah, dog, like, yeah, you can't do that. Like that, that's just like, no, like let me tell you all the laws you're breaking if you do that. So, at I worked for one company where I got the nickname Dream Killer because it was like every day.
Killing people's dreams, Roshida.
You come in with your dream.
He's like, nope, try again.
Nope, 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 that's not gonna work. And after enough of that, it it's really hard to say no all the time. Like I compare it to when I worked at Nordstrom, when I worked at Macy's. At Macy's, I worked at the cosmetic counter, and the answer to most customer questions was no. Like, no, you can't do that. And it became really stressful because then there's a conflict between you and the customer because the customer's not getting what they want. At Nordstrom, the answer was yes to everything. Now, I worked there 20 years ago, so these things might have changed. I don't know. And it was so much easier to be empowered to tell the customer yes all the time because there was no conflict. Like, you want something, I'll figure out how to make it happen for you, and you're done. But there was no yes. There was no like you can tell everybody yes. In my job, it was every day telling people no, and so every day having fights with people, and every day arguing and rehashing the same shit 4 or 5 times in the same meetings about the same no. And I'd have like company vice presidents coming at me crazy, like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "Well, it's my job to tell you no, so I'm going to tell you no. I'm going to send it to you." Like, it was all these emails and memos. And it's not that I love the work. I didn't love the interactions that the work created. And I didn't always love the people I worked with because I can't blame them for this. You know, it's their job to push things forward. And it was my job to be the gatekeeper. And being the gatekeeper is a really hard thing to do every day. So I was doing this in Ohio. I left Ohio to move back to California, which is where I'm originally from, or where I grew up. I went back to the Bay Area where I went to school, and I've been looking to get back there for a long time. I went to a company. I wasn't at the company long before I realized that their business model probably didn't have much chance of long-term success. So about a year and a half after I got there, they announced they were shutting the company down and laying everybody off. So that was a challenge in that I just moved to an area to do this work. And I worked in auto finance, and no one else did that work in the Bay Area because it just didn't make financial sense to do it there. It was a lot, because if you have to have a call center, if you have to have all these people doing this core work, it made sense to do it in other parts of the country. Lots of companies do it in Dallas or in Detroit. And I didn't want to move to Dallas or Detroit, and I didn't want to leave my industry. So looking for jobs was really hard. There wasn't really
and I was gonna say the Bay Area is one of the most expensive like cities in the United States. So to be without a job must have been
Scary.
like
so
mortifying.
I got 6 months notice that I was going to lose my job. Some people just got 1 month, but they needed me because they didn't have anyone else who knew how to do my job. So I stuck around a little bit longer. And then, excuse me, about 3 months into the 6 months, I was like, oh, I should start looking for work. Didn't really find anything I was interested in. Started applying for jobs, but I was like, I don't want these jobs. Like, I'm going to interview for jobs I don't want just to have a job. And the apartment I was living in was a 1-bedroom in Oakland. So it was like maybe 8 or 9, maybe more train stops away from my job. So it wasn't like it was that close. It was like a 45-minute commute. And I was already paying like over $2,000 a month for the one bedroom.
Lord, child. Good Lord, child.
Wait, did you say first 8 or 9 stops is 45 minutes? Because you know in
still paying
Mexico it's
2,000?
like 2-minute stops.
So, but it's also like rush hour and people and time to
Yeah,
get on a
2,000.
train.
That's a
Yeah.
lot of like stresses right there.
And the walk to and from, and, so there was a lot of stress about that. My apartment company decided they wanted to raise the rent, and it was getting closer to 3,000, and I was like,
Good Lord.
And how long ago was this?
this is 2018.
So not
Jeez,
that long
okay, not
ago.
that long ago. So,
Yeah, so I didn't want to sign it. I had to sign. My lease was up. So my lease was up on May 1st. And my last day of work, no, my lease was up on May 8th. My last day of work was like April 30th. And I was going on a trip on May 1st. But I already planned before the layoff happened. So I had to decide, was I going to sign a new lease when I didn't have a job? I didn't have work that I wanted to do.
yeah.
Or was I going to do something else? And I was like, I don't want to be committed to paying $3,000 a month for over a year when I don't have a job. And so I got the idea of like, just travel for a while. And I thought it was a good idea. And it's something I always wanted to do, but it never felt practical to me. Like I saw these, I knew a couple people who did it, but they were all young white women. They were all like in their early 20s, and they spent I'm a yoga teacher, so this is not supposed to be disparaging, but they spent half the year as a yoga teacher, and the other half they traveled. And I'm like, first of all, how do you afford that? Like, if you're,
Yeah.
I know how much yoga teachers usually get paid, so that's what you're doing for half the year. How do you afford to travel for the rest of the year?
You
And
just
I
didn't
don't.
look like them. You didn't resonate.
It didn't resonate in the sense that like I'm 20 years older than them. I've had a career for a long time. I've been through enough. I've paid off enough student loan debt that I know that like I'm committed to this. um, like this is the life I chose. It's the life I paid for. I can't just quit and like travel. But one of the things that happened when they decided to lay people off, they paid me double my salary each month to stick around. So in 6 months, I earned what I would normally earn in a year,
Which was a blessing.
which was a blessing.
You can't take that away. That was the blessing of it.
It,
Yeah.
definitely. And so I had enough money to travel for a while. When I checked my account one day and I was like, oh, I actually could travel. But then the fear set in, and I was like, what am I
I don't
doing? So
have a job.
I don't have a job. And like, if I come back, will I be able to get a job if I've been out of the industry for a while and this and that?
So all those
And
practical thoughts were just like running through your head.
yeah, so at first I was like, this is a great idea. And then within like 3 days, I was like, oh no, I could never do this. So I was seeing a therapist at the time because I was stressed about work. And so I went to her, and she was an interesting therapist in that she was very vocal about her opinion. You know, some therapists are like, oh, really? Tell me more. But she was like, no, girl, that's not a good idea. Like, she would just say stuff like that. I'd be like,
Wow.
okay. Like, she had no problem telling you what she thought you should do.
So you were
That's
looking in the mirror
interesting.
basically because you were doing that for your job beforehand, and
Yeah.
now it's coming back at you, and you're just like,
It's like her own fears were coming up to the surface.
But
That's what it seemed
no,
like.
okay, no, she didn't say that was a bad idea. She was saying other things. Like I would say, like, "Oh, I want to do this," and she'd be like, "Really?" Nah. But when I told her about this, she was like, "It's a great idea. You should do it." And then I came back to her one week with my fears, and she was like, "You're bullshitting. Like, you need to do this." I was like, "What?" And we talked about it a little more. And my lease was up, so I didn't have to pay rent. When I left Ohio, I had sold my house and didn't buy a new one. So I didn't have a mortgage or anything like any deep commitment like that. I wasn't in a relationship. And I think about it, and I listened to your guys' episode the other day about being single while traveling. And I think about the people I have been in relationships with, and I can't think of a single one of them that would have said, like, this is really what you want to do. Go live your best life.
yeah.
Like, everyone I can think of would have been like, about us, that, like, they want to be supportive, but they also don't want to lose the thing that they the connection. And so I didn't have that going on. My mom was supportive, and the only thing I had to manage was my dog. And my friend volunteered without me even asking her. My friend volunteered to take my dog, and so it was like there's literally no reason for me not to go, and yet still I pulled back. Like I talked to my therapist, and I was like, what if I work for like get another job and then work for a year, and then after I've saved up and I've planned, because this is like a month before my job is over. At this point, I was like, what if I like then after planning for a year, then I can go. And she was like, you're bullshitting. Like, if you get another job, you're never going to do this. And I was like, you know what? You're right. Like, anything could change. I could pop up with a baby. Or, you know what I mean? Like, who knows the things that, like, we tell ourselves are impediments to the life we want to lead. Who knows which one of those would have popped up for me, and that would have prevented me from, I would have used that to prevent myself from doing what I wanted to do. And so I was like, yeah, like do it. My plan was to leave for a year, not come back to the United States, and then come back and figure out what I wanted to do next. And it's been, maybe like 19 or 20 months. And I've been back to the United States a lot more than I expected. It's been about 20 months, but I don't see myself living back in the United States anytime soon, probably not in the next 5 years. And I definitely don't see myself going back to the industry I was in before.
Well, how is it being back now? You have chronic illnesses, right?
Yeah.
You talk openly about that.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that part? Because I think some people would say, well, I'm sick, or I have this, so I can't leave the States. Was that a piece that kind of was in your mind that was like, well, what about healthcare?
So yes and no. So my chronic illnesses are usually triggered by foods that I'm not supposed to eat, and then some random like stress and things like that. And so with my stress level being significantly down when I'm on a long-term choose your own adventure versus going to work and fighting through commuting every day and everybody else, my stress level is definitely lower. And so that has impacted that in a really good way. There are some things like I get really, really bad menstrual cramps, like, and associated menstrual pains. Like the last few months I was in the US, every period came, I threw up. I passed out in the back of a shared Uber once, like just from the pain, just gone. Woke up like, where am I, in the back of a stranger's car? And so one of the things I had to do, my doctor said the only way to deal with that, besides having them cut me open and like take out a piece of my uterus to test it, which I wasn't into, like, if we don't have to do any cutting, let's not do any cutting, was to take a birth control pill every single day. And so the question for me when I left was, how do I get my medication? Like, I have a U.S. prescription. What am I going to do in other countries? And that was one of the most practical medical questions, I guess, that I had. And I knew a lot of countries who get things over the counter. And so I've kind of become my own over the counter pharmacist. So when I was in Thailand, there was a pill that wasn't exactly the same, but it was very, very...
The cowbell. You know, in Mexico, they always have somebody making noise. Do you hear that cowbell?
Yeah, I can't hear it.
I couldn't hear it.
Oh, but okay. I heard a little bit how you say it. A little bit how you say it.
All right, let's just start with Thailand. I'm sorry.
You're good. I could edit her part, so you're fine. Just continue.
Because I'm like, that damn cowbell.
I was not even hearing it.
So when I was in Thailand, I found a pill that was very similar in like the makeup of the hormones in the birth control pill. So I bought like a 12-month supply so that if I was in another country, I could have that. And then I'd probably end up back in another country where I could get the same thing. So that for me was the biggest thing. Like, what do I do about my prescriptions? One thing I have had done is when I've had some people meet me in some places and I just tell them before they come, like, go to Walgreens and pick up my prescription. Here's my information. And they bring it to me. And so things that weren't as readily available over the counter, but things maybe I don't need a monthly supply of, it's just sort of like emergency medicine in case something happens. I've had that happen. I have some eye issues. I have had that flare up in Mexico. That was before I realized I was sensitive to corn. I can't eat corn or like irritates my body. But like I live in Mexico. So I was eating, before I knew this, I was eating nothing but corn for like maybe like 3 weeks. So what ended up happening was I needed to get like an injection in my eye to get like, to put steroids in there to calm down the inflammation because it was crazy inflamed. And it's happened before I realized it was associated with food and before I realized I had a corn allergy or sensitivity. And so I was staying at an Airbnb when this happened, and I had the hostess it was the only time I've ever done a shared space at Airbnb, and I was so grateful I did because my hostess was there and she called a doctor for me and gave me the address and sent me on my way. And if I was trying to do this on my own, trying to find like, because I needed a specialist that could see me that day. So looking online to find a specialist with one eye, because I couldn't see out of the other one, calling around to find someone who was available. And all of the receptionists only spoke Spanish. And my Spanish is okay, but it's not making an appointment with a with a medical specialist. Okay. She did all of that work for me. And then I got an Uber and I went and I found someone and he was great. And it was like, I got the prescription I needed from him. I got a visit. I think everything, all the follow-up visits and everything may have been like around $100, including the prescription. And it was like, same day appointment. It was amazing. So I have had some medical issues flare up, but since I've left the US, almost every time I have like a medical issue, it's when I'm back in the US. Like a year ago, I was here and I was supposed to go to Canada for Thanksgiving, and I had some crazy stomach thing happening. This year, I was in the US for less than 24 hours and my knee like blew out and no one knows how. Because I went to sleep fine and I woke up with a swollen and crunchy knee and then I had to get surgery. And from that, I'm here for like 3 or 4 months because of that knee. And if it had happened 24 hours earlier, everything, PT, surgery, everything else would have been a lot more expensive if it had happened in Mexico. So it's kind of like, I don't know why when I come to the US things happen, but it's the place where I've had the most problems. I'm wondering if part of that is if something happens in another country, I'm more likely to ignore it than when I am in the US and I'm here and I still have my medical coverage and I can get it checked out. So
That's interesting. What do you think?
I don't think so. Like the things that have happened, like when I had the stomach bug last year, I could not stand up for 3 weeks. I could not, the last 2 weeks, I could not eat at all. A solid, maybe like week and a half of just like fluids. Like that's not me making, you know what I mean? Like this is a legit, went to the ER twice. The first time didn't help. The second time it gave me a different antibiotic and it helped. But it was just, I don't know if it was like not being used to drinking the water here or what it was, but something knocked me out. But it's funny. People always assume, like when I was sick, they were like, oh, where are you coming? Like they assume I get it elsewhere. Like, oh, this must have happened. You must have eaten something somewhere else. And I was like, no, I was here a week before this happened. And then it was like 3 weeks of continued illness. So,
I mean, it's interesting because I was actually talking to a friend of mine, and she was visiting LA for the first time, and she was there for a week, and she was sick as a dog. It was just something that she ate, and then when she came back to the DC area, she was fine. So it's like,
yeah.
I don't know, but it's interesting. Like you've had all these things happen, and yet you still mustered up the courage to move abroad and travel and commit to your mid-career gap year. And you still will say, listen, I'm going back. Once his knee is all good and ready, I am going back. So I'm curious to find out, like, where do you find that sense of courage and that to continue to move forward on the things that you want to do?
So it doesn't feel like courage. Um, so right now, I am in my mom's guest room. And you can only live in your mom's guest room so long. Like legit, like once, I want to be I like living independently. I like living on my own. I like having my own space. And so for me, the idea of having my own space now equates to living abroad. Like the thought of I don't want to pay US rent. Like there's nowhere in the US I actually want to live right now. I want to go explore the countries. So my plan for next year was to maybe spend 2 months in a couple of different countries, going back to Mexico first. Because when I left Mexico with a fully furnished apartment and all my stuff in it. And then the knee thing happened, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to be back for like 4 months. I'm not paying rent for those 4 months. And so I had to have a friend pack up all my things. The apartment owners let her in, and she packed up all my things, and they're in storage. But yeah, like I have an apartment full of stuff in Mexico. I want to come back down there. I want to get it. I want to set up my life again as I knew it. And then I want to go see more of the world. And it's not necessarily, like I said, it doesn't feel like courage. It feels like what I'm supposed to be doing. Like for me right now at this time of my life, it is what feels right.
Yeah, it's almost like out of necessity. It's like I need this, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and so for me, like I thought it was a need. Living here with my mom for months has been interesting. Like I said, I'm enough of an introvert, but I definitely need my own time, and she's not like that at all. And so we have that little clash of personalities. But I'm learning things about her that I never knew because I haven't lived with her since I was a child. And I'm having conversations that I wouldn't have had as a child. And so there's this bonding happening,
Which is great.
which is great, yeah. And I my dad passed away last year. Yes, no, yes, I forgot what year this was. Yeah, in 2018, about 2 months into my gap year. I so when I went to see him say goodbye before I left because he lived in LA, so I flew down. And he'd been sick for a long time, so he said, this might be the last time I see you. And we both kind of had that moment of like, yeah, this might be it. And then within 2 months, he passed away. So I had planned on not coming back to the States at all, but then I was coming back for his funeral. So once I broke that rule of not coming back, I just came back whenever I felt like it. Um, but it also made me want to not be too far from my only remaining parent for too long. So I'm spending more time with her, and that's one of the reasons I chose Mexico. Almost so, she's 71 now. I want to spend some more time with her. So I wanted to be somewhere that I could get to quickly. She could get down to me quickly. I wanted to be able to come here easily. I have a goddaughter down here, cousins, so I can come to Florida, spend time with them, and really be with my family in ways that I couldn't be if I was back in Thailand or if I was in South Africa, which was my other choice for the year. Yeah.
So during this whole gap year, what are some things that you feel like you've learned about yourself or you discovered about yourself since that whole experience that maybe you didn't notice before?
Um, I I think I'm a lot more sure of what I want when I settle down. At least like the kind of neighborhoods I want to live in when I settle down. But I've done a lot of traveling to different places and can see like what it is that I like. Like I like a very walkable city close to a big city if it's not in a big city so in Mexico City I live in Roma Norte, which is nice, it's walkable, it's not like too busy, it's not too hectic, but it's still got that like kind of crazy Mexico City vibe, which I like. Um, so I've learned that about myself, which I didn't really know before. Um, I don't think I knew how loneliness would impact me before traveling. My therapist told me that that was like the one thing I had to prepare for was like to be able to sit with loneliness as like a thing that happens and a thing that's okay to happen. And I've learned how to do that. But at first, I didn't recognize loneliness for what it was. Because, like I said, I'm an introvert. I'm used to being alone. But after a few days, it was kind of like, oh, have I really not seen another human for like 4 days? What am I doing? Or, or times when I was in another country where I didn't see Black people and I didn't hear English. Those were the two hardest parts for me. So if I didn't see anyone who looked like me, and I didn't see anyone who spoke, I didn't hear my language being spoken, but loneliness kicked in a little harder and a little faster because it was like, I feel surrounded by foreigners. And of course, I've gone to a foreign place. So, of course, I'm going to be surrounded by foreigners. But I didn't realize how important it was to my psyche to have something familiar by me. And so, since then, I started like traveling with things that are definitely have a sense of homeliness to them, the sense that like this is my thing, kind of like little security blankets, you know, whether that's like a crystal or something else, that's something that is mine and makes me feel like this is my space, this is my thing. That's helped a little bit. But yeah, hearing English, speaking, and seeing Black people who speak English has been like one of the best
Yeah.
things for
You
healing
learn
that.
a lot about yourself because you have nothing but time with
Yes, with
yourself.
yourself.
And it's
Yes,
time that you've never really had in the
yes,
States because everything else was going on, right?
yes.
It's like you're an introvert. I have no idea what that looks like back in the States. I learned how to be okay being somewhat of an introvert as I started traveling because I wasn't what I called uber extrovert, right? Always around people, always wanted to be around. I like to thrive around groups of people.
Hmm.
But being a traveler taught me that being alone is different from being lonely, number one. Number
Definitely.
two is loneliness is a thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It is a thing. And learning to be okay with my own company.
Right. Yeah. For me, that was I was okay with my own company, or I thought I was more okay with my own company until, like I said, it'd be a 4 day stretch, and I'd be like, okay, no, I need to see people, I need to talk to people, and then you have that conflict with time zones. Like I want to call, maybe I can just call someone I know, but it's so you're usually I spend a lot of time so far away that the time zones never really allowed me to connect with people for any meaningful conversations. And so I have to find people where I am. And so I started reaching out more in different groups I'm in to say, like, hey, I'm here. Who's in this city? That kind of thing. So I could meet people there. That was really helpful too.
Yeah, I mean,
That's-
I definitely relate to that because I'm a certified introvert and I love my solitude. But even living in Japan, Japan was definitely a place I think I felt the most loneliest because of the fact that Japan isn't about nobody's English, okay? Everything is in Japanese, everything. And so I found myself feeling extremely lonely. And then, because the time zone is even worse in Japan, it's even longer. So making those phone calls and talking to people just didn't happen on a regular basis. But I believe that, like Nubia said, that loneliness created the space for me to really get to know myself and to also be okay with it. Because I think a lot of people in the States, they really don't understand what it means to be by themselves and do things by themselves. Like I have a cousin, love her to death, but sometimes when we go to the movies, she's like, oh, we need to sit together. And I'm like, if it happens, sure, like we don't always have to sit together. But people are just so accustomed to always having something or someone around. And what it happens is it becomes like a replacement for things. And when you're traveling and abroad, you can't substitute a lot for anything.
no.
So you're just there and you just have to like always look in the mirror and say, hey, there you are with all your
Me?
thoughts.
Yeah.
And when it's funny because when I came to Mexico City, I was like, well, Sheeta's here. We were never able to get up before you left.
No, but I'll be back. And you'll be there?
But I'm leaving.
Where are you going?
Oaxaca.
Okay, well, I plan on traveling around when I get back, so hopefully I'll run into you somewhere.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I learned when traveling, it's one of the things I always tell people who think about a journey like this, is that your decision muscle becomes so much stronger because you're making so many more decisions. And at first, it was exhausting to me. Going to a new, like, at first I was traveling to a new city like every week. And so trying to figure out where to get food, where's the grocery store, what is the equivalent detergent that would make some sense to me for me to buy, and
Yep.
all of those questions, it was always like there are so many decisions to make. It's almost too much. And now it's gotten so much easier for me and so much simpler. I think because I care less, because I realize that like none of these decisions are bad decisions. Like if I grab the wrong detergent and I can't read the label, I probably won't ruin my clothes. Like I'll probably figure it out. And if I ruin this load, it's not the end of the world. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. So I spent a lot more time on that kind of thing than I did before. And like when I first left, I was talking to my therapist again. One of the things I talked about was I have a lot of things, but I wanted to travel with just a carry-on bag. And I was like, but hair, right? Like, but black hair. Like, I need more products. And she was a white woman, so I don't know if she understood what we're talking about, but black women tend to have a lot of products, lots of conditioner, lots of moisturizing products, unless like Nubia, you have
No hair.
No hair at all. I just need a brush.
And so I was worried about that. And one of the things in talking to her, I opened myself up to was a possibility that I might find something I like more while traveling. If I'm not reliant on the things that I know, I might find things I like more out there. I didn't. I'm telling y'all, keeping it real. But I learned things about my hair. Like my hair hates protein, which I found out because I was trying I had to try things I didn't try before. And so if I spent more time looking at ingredients, like, do I like this? Do I not like that? My hair hates protein. I never knew this before. I found it out by trying products and trying to I was in Mexico, so I was still reading in Spanish and like, okay, what ingredients are in all of these? Now I get it. I never did that at home. I just used whatever, I saw enough ads for, I guess. Like whatever motivated me to buy it, that's what I used. I didn't think about what it was doing. But no, I didn't find anything I really liked more. I found some American products that I really liked. Found them actually in Mexico in a Walmart that carried a lot of U.S. products. That's a lot of info about hair for this little section.
Well, I wanted to just touch base a little bit about you talking about decisions, because I had a coaching call with a coach, and one of the things, and I was like trying to decide on a couple of things. I'm a Libra, I'm indecisive, working on it, it's work in progress. And so one of the things that she said was like, no decision is ever a wrong decision, like ever. It's because, we create that judgment and put that judgment on the decision. All decisions are feedback, but the worst thing that you could do is to remain in limbo.
Yes.
Like limbo is not a great feeling, and it creates a lot of angst, anxiety, and it doesn't feel good. But the quicker you make that decision, the quicker you get the feedback, and the quicker you can kind of like keep moving, in whatever direction that needs to happen. So I just wanted to highlight that, because a lot of people, one of the things that we realize from our guests or from our audience is that they have a hard time just kind of like making a decision because they're afraid, or because of family, anything. They're just like really just sitting on things and just waiting.
So one of the things about me is, as a Taurus, is that when I make a decision, it is full steam ahead. Feedback, I can't hear your feedback. Like I'm just like, I've made the decision, I am going. And so I think that's one of the reasons I have been so cautious about making the decisions. But on this journey, I've learned to be more open to seeing like the daily decisions and the like I said, when I left, I wasn't going to come back to the States for a year, but quickly I realized like, okay, maybe that's not what your journey is meant to look like. And so having to make a choice I feel like on this journey, once you sort of start this nomad life, almost every day is a decision of like, where am I going to live today? Like it's
Girl,
We were just
my
talking about this
life.
last night. That was her
Just
life last
last
night.
night, I was just like, well, I miss Thailand, but Mexico's cool. But I really was
right.
thinking about like you
And
choose
there
every day to day.
you choose I'm making very big decisions for myself every day. And because I'm doing that, I realize that what I thought were big decisions are smaller decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Mexico and Thailand, does it really matter? Aren't you going to go back to both of them at some point in your life? Like like, yes, I'll go here one day. Yes, I'll go there one day. At some point, it boils down to what you're willing to sacrifice in the moment to do the one thing you want to do the most. And like I said, I spend a lot of time thinking like, what is the right country for me to go to first and then next? And sometimes it's easy as like, where can I get a cheap plane ticket to? Like what?
It is that easy.
Yeah.
Sometimes it comes down to that deciding factor.
Sometimes it is
Seriously.
that easy, but when I lived at home, most of those decisions were already set in stone. Where am I going to live? The place I pay rent. Where am I going to go today? The place that pays me to show up every day so that I can pay that rent. And so many of those decisions are interconnected and in a loop that you can't get out of one without getting out of the other,
Mm-hmm.
or like you can't change one without impacting the other. And so you sort of end up set in your ways and set in your day and your habit in ways that you might not be if when you have the freedom to do a little bit more of what you want. And that's what I found on my gap year was a freedom to not feel stuck by any one thing, but every aspect of my life is in question every day. Who do I want to be today? Where do I want to be? And I think that allows you to see more of your core aspects of who you are and what
Yes.
you like, because you're not doing anything because you have to.
Mm-hmm.
You spend a lot of time trying to figure out what you want to do.
But let me ask you though, because there's always the other side. Does that ever become exhausting for you? Because like for me lately, right? And I think it's because when we were in Thailand, we had a home base. It was more like stable in a way, right? The normal way of what stable looked like. And we had found a community, and I had Francis there, so I had a roommate, somebody that I can talk to every day if I wanted to, or whatever. But now that this year that I've been moving around a lot, it's kind of stressful in a way,
So
just packing up that suitcase. Even the thought of wanting to pack up my suitcase is stressful, to be honest with you.
yeah. So I realized that I'm not the kind of person that wants to go to see a new city every week. That is exhausting. It's too many for me. It was just wait, where'd you guys go? Too many decisions to do that each week.
Okay, you're there.
It's
Just
Okay.
okay.
slow down.
Yeah. It's okay.
Okay. Sorry.
It's
No,
okay.
it's okay.
Um, so for me, packing up each week and moving each week was too much. But I can do every couple of months, and that's good for me. But I think for me, it's you're when I hear what you're saying, it reminds me of where I was because I think I moved a lot in the beginning and then started moving slower in the end, and that's when I started finding more community um, and more of a slow travel kind of sense. But I realized that I didn't have to make that choice. So you're saying it's exhausting to always pack up and move, but that's a decision that you're choosing to make to pack up and move, and you don't have to make that decision to pack up and move. And so there's a variety of reasons for wanting to do it, and I'm sure they're all very valid. But you said, aren't those just isn't it exhausting to do that? Yes, it is. But you're making the decision to do that, and you have the freedom to choose something else.
True. But I think sometimes, like, as a nomad, our thought process is like there's so much to see in such
Yeah.
a short time. So when we're on a continent, we try, right? We're like, well, we're here, so we might as well go and do or see and be whatever. And then you start building community. You start meeting people who live on a different continent, and you're like,
Mhm.
oh, well, you know what? Guess what? It's maybe winter on this continent, so I don't really want to be here right now. So let me move over to this continent. You know what I mean? It's like it's so easy because we have that what you would call freedom.
Right.
It's about utilizing it, right? Because sometimes I feel like if I stay here too long, I'm not doing
Yes.
The nomad
But
thing.
the nomad thing.
are those your expectations, or are you trying to live up to somebody else's expectations of what nomad looks like?
Ooh, she
That's
bringing
a
it
good
to you.
question.
She bringing it to you.
Okay, therapist.
It's a therapy. You
Uh,
know, I was just gonna say it's interesting he said that because like being back in Boston, and Boston obviously it's just not a place that I want to be 100% of the time. And I thought to myself, oh, why don't I just go back to DC? But the thought of going through the process of getting an apartment, furnishing an apartment, paying that astronomical rent, I was just like, nah, I'm good. I'm really good. And it's, sometimes we do have to make those compromises and those trade-offs because it's just on the other side, it's just not worth it. Well, at least for me, to do all that kind of movement. It's so much easier being out of the country to move around like that because then maybe, you know, I can go get an apartment that's already furnished and it's okay. I don't have to worry about furnishing or doing all these things. So, yeah, it's just like a trade-off.
There's definitely trade-offs to each one. I was definitely in Nubia's position a while ago because when I first left, one of the biggest things I had in my mind was like, well, what if I have to come home earlier? What if I want to come home early? Like, then it won't have been a gap year and it won't be like what I told people I was going to do. And then I realized like, these people aren't paying my bills. Like, I can't live for other people's expectations. Like, if someone is disappointed because I traveled for 9 years instead of a year, like, do I really care? I'm like, why would I let their expectations matter to me? And why would they have expectations of my life? So at the end of the day, it didn't really matter. You know?
No, I totally get that. I get
It was
that.
kind of like, I try to live each day by what feels best to me. But I found that when I don't travel, I need to find a more medium ground. When I was in Mexico City and I planned on being there for at least 6 months, there are so many tourist things that I didn't do because it was always like, I have tomorrow, I have tomorrow, I have tomorrow, I have next week. There's always, so to your point, when you get really comfortable in a place, I felt the same way. Like, am I really being a nomad? Am I really being an expat? If I'm, going to the grocery store, sitting down at my desk and working on stuff like 8 hours today, like, why does it matter that I'm here? But it's a community I wanted to be in, and so that's where I was. Um,
I can definitely relate to that because it's like I'm back home and I had no plans. I remember I was listening to one of the episodes that we did and I was like, I ain't coming back to the U.S. and here I am. So it's like, and then you kind of feel weird because you're like, I'm not living up to that. But at the end of the day, you really have to do what's right for you.
So what would be your one piece of advice? Because one thing about your travels is you created a whole brand around it. So Sheeta on the Loose is very informative, right? You share pretty much you're very transparent about your own life and you share your thoughts on certain places, certain things. So what one piece of advice would you give to that person who is in that kind of same situation, right? Like, not really happy at work, but needs to work because they have to use that salary to pay that rent that's already too high. And, they just have these thought process of wanting to do it, but they're having those beliefs that they can't do it right now and one day.
so pick your one day. That would be my advice. Pick a date. If you really want this, it won't happen unless you pick a date and work towards that date. If you're not sure you want it, start saving and see what happens. If you really want it to happen, pick a date, keep that date in mind, and work towards that date. And that means like saving. Maybe that means hustling and getting a second job. Maybe that means cutting down on your expenses. Maybe it means paying off debt quicker or slower, depending on what works for you. But if you don't pick that original date, that that this is the day I'm going to leave the country date, you will not go because there's always going to be another expense, another something, another trip that gets between you and what you really want to do. So the picking the date is my advice. And I actually have to give credit. I got that one from Stephanie Perry, Vicarious.
Yeah, Stephanie's really cool.
First time I talked to her, she said it, and I was like, "Oh wait, that's exactly what I did. I just didn't realize I was doing it." A friend of mine was having a birthday party in Mexico, and so I picked that date as my departure date. So that trip. So I was going to start in Mexico and then start my traveling from there. If I hadn't done that, I don't know what would have happened. I don't know when I would have left. I think there would have always been like next week or something else, or a baby.
But I love that way you said that. Pick your one day.
Pick your one day.
There's nothing wrong with just circling a date on the calendar and seeing what happens.
Whether that's 2 months from now or 2 years from now, if you don't work towards it, it won't happen because this isn't the kind of thing that just happens to you one day.
No.
Oh, it didn't just happen to you too, did it?
No. Actually, our stories are very similar. You know, I got laid off, but I got laid off laid off. The great thing about it was they were generous enough to give me 3 months worth of salary, during that layoff. So you got 6 months, I got 3, I still had my health insurance for 6 months. So there were some things that allowed me to make the plan, but I was gone within 6 months.
Okay.
I planned it, but then I dragged my feet for at least good 3-4 months. And then I was like, sure, I'm just gonna do it. But mine was a slower process. Yeah.
Did you ever have a date picked?
Yeah, so I went through a program, went through the TEFL, because I was gonna get my TEFL, so I went through the program, and they were like, hey, what's going on? Are you still interested, kind of thing? And I never responded. I dragged my feet, all that fear and all that stuff. And I'm like, who am I to do this? Like, I don't know, like what I'm doing, that sort of thing. And then finally I was like, and my father passed away too, so our stories are quite similar. And I was like, man, I don't know what's gonna happen in my life if I don't do something radical. And so I just did it.
Yeah, I think for me, the resistance that came up told me a lot about who I am. Like what things in that moment I valued. Like I valued being a lawyer more than I valued practicing law. If that makes sense. Like it was part of my identity because of what I'd done so long. It's what I'd paid my bills.
That's a whole nother conversation.
That's a whole
girl.
other conversation.
That is a whole nother
That's
conversation.
a lot of people's stories.
Oh my gosh, we're gonna have to do this again and talk about identity.
Part 2.
Yeah. So I rarely ever mention that because it doesn't matter to me. In the space that I'm in now, it has no value.
But that was good. We need to circle back to that seriously. Because a lot of us tie our identity to a title
and the work that we
do. Yes.
And once you strip that away, it's like it's fear. It's scary for people.
It's scary, especially if it's something you've worked hard for or worked hard at for a long time. It's hard to imagine who you are when you're not that. Mm-hmm. But it's important to figure out as well.
Yeah.
Wow. Geez. Okay. Well, let's just wrap this up with one more question that I really have for you. It's like, what's next?
Okay. Well, I'm working on healing this knee right now. So what's next today is going to work out my knee a little bit. But in the larger scale of things, what's next for me is to provide more coaching to people who want to do it. I've been doing that so far, coaching people about how to take their own journey like this. And next year, I'm planning on releasing some digital products related to that. So stick around to see some of those. But I also really want to be of service to people however I can, especially Black women, because we don't frequently see ourselves as nomads. We don't typically see ourselves living freely in the world. And that's one of the things that has come to me the most on this trip, is really enjoying seeing Black people be free, seeing Black kids play on the beach in Durban and no one gets mad at them for being loud or being kids or making a mess or doing anything. Those are things that I haven't experienced in the United States that I've really enjoyed experiencing abroad. And so it's one thing I want to help more people experience on their own. It's like being out and being free to do whatever it is you want to do and doing living their best life on their own terms. And so I think that's one of the things, like summing up what we talked about, I think that's one of the things that has really hit me this year is that I get to define what my life looks like. Instead of just picking something like a career or a city or a job and holding on to that until something makes me change. Now I can define that each day or each month, each week. And there's a real joy that comes from that. A real joy from saying like, I like who I am at this moment and I want to continue doing this tomorrow. Or saying like, no, this doesn't feel right. What's next? And so I love helping Black women get free. And so I want more of that. I want to help more people experience this.
That's beautiful.
It's powerful.
That is very powerful. Yeah. And, you know, that wraps up by saying you create your reality.
Period.
Yeah. And period.
Yeah.
Hard start, period. So we have this lightning round really thing that we like to do where we just hit you with a couple of questions and you just answer it with the one word answer, right?
Okay.
So let's hit you off. Coffee, tea, or smoothie?
Smoothie.
Airbnb, hostel, or hotel?
Super fancy hotel or
One, Roshida.
I'm, I need to know more details about the housing situation, super fancy hotel or Airbnb, one of the two. I'd rather be really homey and comfy or super luxe.
All right, got it. Breakfast, lunch, or dinner?
Breakfast.
Group or solo travel?
Solo.
Okay. Well, you was able to get those except for the hotel Airbnb. She was like, wait
a minute.
Not
hotel.
Where? Super luxe or no?
That's it.
Listen, because some of these hotels out here
get catfish too.
they are catfish. I don't do that anymore. I'm too old for that.
I can dig it. Thank you so much for being with us. We truly appreciate it. And taking time out. So your gap year is now going to be an extended gap year because you've already reached your year, yes?
Yeah, I think it's like a gap life now. I don't know.
Say, it's like gap life.
I'm hashtag expat life, I guess. I don't, it is what it is. I've stopped trying to define it in ways that make sense for people instead of just sort of letting people know where I am and what I've done. Because a lot of things we do, society doesn't have a term for because we're not supposed to be doing it in the eyes of the societies we've grown up in. Like we're not like, I come from a West Indian family. Like I'm supposed to have a job. I'm supposed to have like 3 jobs. Like what is
that? 3 kids, girl, to get 3 jobs. Okay.
And so I talked to my family. They're like, okay, sure, right. But everyone. They learn to adjust. People love you, learn to adjust.
Really quickly before we leave, because I'm from Haiti, and my aunt not too long ago was like very serious too. Like, Francis, what are you doing with your life? And I'm like, I thought I was living it, but I guess I'm not.
I get like, so when are you gonna come back? Question, and I'm kind of like, no job, no kids, no bills. When am I coming back? Too. Like, why do you expect me to? Oh, because you've never left. That's why you
hit him with
say that. Hit him with the family drama. But like that's part of it. Like you can't imagine living outside of the confines and the constraints that we build for ourselves. And so when you see someone else do it, it feels like an anomaly instead of thinking like that could be me too. So I want more people doing the like, well, what about me? Me too. So
Love it.
You probably
Well,
won't be my.
well, let's just say on the immigrant standpoint, they did leave, right? Because you were raised
Yeah.
in America. So to them, it's like, how are you going back to these places
Yeah.
that they literally try to leave from because America tries to paint this picture of the land of the free, home of the brave, and to them, just this like, why would you want to leave?
Yeah, that's my aunt's
So we
way
got to
to
look
show.
at it from
Yeah.
both angles.
So it's a little bit of that, but mostly in my family, it's like, where is the responsibility? Like my mom has said that to me before, like, you're not responsible for anything, and I'm like, just myself.
Imagine that.
And that's enough. And that's enough.
Right? Like,
Imagine that.
yeah, like that's I don't have to be responsible for another human or a home or a car or an animal. Like, you can choose to. There's nothing wrong with the choice, but you also, like, I don't want to be judged because that's not what I want for my life right
That's
now.
not the choice you made.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's more of that in my family. Not that you're going back to these places, but that, like, I worked so hard for you to get ahead,
Yeah.
and
Now you
that's
just
more of
throw
what
it
it is.
away.
I worked so hard to build this foundation for you, and not just my immediate family, but like the whole family has an idea. Like, you leave to build a better life, but what are you doing to build the better life for your next generation? Is part of, I think, the underlying thought and the undercurrent there is you're not building for the future. But I'm 40. I don't have kids. Like, I don't know if there is a
But you
future.
are. You're building a legacy. You are Sheeta, and you have empowered and inspired many, I'm sure, to make decisions or to rethink certain things. So there's so much more that you offer to people that you would never be able to offer on a 9 to 5. Like,
I see it as like a pioneer.
But, oh, thank you. But until those people are my mama's grandkids, like, I don't know that she's gonna see it the same way y'all do.
Probably not. But that's okay.
It's okay. Like, I have to. Part of living this life outside of the norms is learning to accept being judged for living outside of the norms.
Yeah.
You know?
thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
talking
Roshida.
to me today.